Here is Markacadeey Media. My name is Dr. Ali Faqih, and I'm here to interview Dr. Ambassador Augustine Mahiga, who is the Special Representative of Somalia. On behalf of Markacadeey, we would like here to ask you a couple of questions. And my first question is, what is the purpose of you meeting with the diaspora, Canadian diasporas here in Somalia? And we know that you are going to meet a lot of Somali diasporas overseas. What is your intention and your purpose for that meeting?
This is an opportunity for me as the special representative of the Secretary General for Somalia to reach out and get to know the Somalia diaspora. Because we have reached a very critical stage in the peace process where inclusiveness of all the Somali stakeholders is important in sustaining the peace process. We have just gone through a process of the Kampala Accord, which gave rise to the roadmap. And the roadmap was signed in Mogadishu among all the stakeholders and need to be pushed through the coming 12 months by all the stakeholders, including the diaspora. My visit to Canada, to the United States, and later in the month to the Scandinavian countries, is to explain the meaning of the accord and the roadmap, as well as to seek and enlist the support and the participation of the diaspora in implementing the roadmap and the future reconstruction of Somalia.
What would you tell to those Somalis who are very skeptical of what's going on in Somalia right now and the role of the UN, in the sense that if you look in the history back, what so far has UN done? It looks like getting easy solutions. For example, I can make an example. In 2008, 550 parliamentarians were formed. In 2010, 2011, this year in the Kampala Accord, a consensus was reached to remove the Prime Minister from Hagi. So it looks like always you guys are there to resolve a crisis and getting easy solutions. So the question is, people, as I said earlier, are skeptic about the role of the role of UN. So what would you tell those in the Somali community who thinks that UN is not doing what it's supposed to do?
First of all, it's important to understand that the Somalia problem is one big crisis that has continued for 21 years. Inside that complex crisis, there have been a series of other crises in which the United Nations has tried to resolve. I'll give you 3 examples. When Somalia was abandoned by the international community in the early 90s, following the failure of the multinational force and the downing of the Black Hawk helicopter, it was the United Nations, together with IGAD and the African Union, that started picking the pieces to refocus attention on Somalia by establishing the political office, which now I am heading. Secondly, when there was a major crisis in Somalia between the transitional federal government that was formed in Kenya and after 2 years transferred to Somalia, there was a crisis between that government and the Islamic courts, which was followed by the Ethiopian intervention in Somalia. That was a major crisis that sent the Islamic courts outside the country into Eritrea and reformed themselves into the ARS, the Alliance for the Re-Liberation of Somalia. The United Nations came in with the Djibouti Agreement to resolve that crisis. Not only did Ethiopia leave the country, but there was a formation of the two political strengths of the ARS and the TFG to form the new government. Again, it was the United Nations that made that effort. The third and recent example is when for 6 months the entire TFIs were in paralysis. Parliament and the executive were not working together. Even the individuals in those institutions were not communicating with each other. The transition period was ending, time was ticking, and we were getting deeper into the crisis. It was again the United Nations and the regional countries, namely Uganda and the United Nations, that we worked around the President and the Speaker to break that impasse. And through the Kampala Accord, the peace process was saved from deep crisis and reactivated. It is this phase that we are in now, that not only are the institutions talking to each other and working together, but we have come with a roadmap to define the direction for Somalia in the next 12 months. A roadmap that is different from any other previous experiments and initiatives because it has been prepared by Somalis. It is owned by Somali stakeholders. It has been signed by Somali stakeholders. The diaspora is very much part of this because in the government there are many people from the diaspora. And the reason I'm here is to explain, invite, and encourage the diaspora to be part of the implementation process of this. So you can see the UN is really part of the solution, not part of the problem.
TNG term expires in July or August next year, 2012. And in your plan, there is a possibility that an election can be held, a fair election can be held. Is that possible with the current situation of Somalia, where more than 5 regions, big regions of Somalia, is still in the hands of Al-Shabaab?
As you probably know, we were supposed to end the current transition in July this year with the election of the President and the Speaker. But that was postponed for the better. Because before the next elections, we need to do 3 fundamental things. One is to ensure that security is expanded beyond Mogadishu, and that is happening to the rest of the country. Secondly is to have a constitution, which has been one of the major transitional tasks to be accomplished since 2004. In this 1 year, we want that constitution adopted. And thirdly is to have a reformed parliament and elections at the end of the 1 year. I believe the constitution which we are going to have will help us to have a more representative government, a more inclusive institutions, a more democratic elections. And by the end of this 1 year period, the intention is to have new institutions, elected leadership, and hopefully a greater territory where there is peace. We may not have elections every part of the country, but we shall have representative elections that are definitely more inclusive and more democratic than what we have had in the past 7 years. And this is going to be, I hope, a source of greater stability and pave the way for carrying out the democratic process as the territory expands.
In the roadmap, there was a talk of discussions of reducing the number of parliamentarians. What is the process? How are you going to select the new parliamentarians and the new parliament next year?
The roadmap has 4 pillars. The first pillar is related to security. The second pillar is related to the constitutional process, which includes reform of parliament and a preparation for elections. The third pillar is political outreach and a reconciliation. And the fourth pillar is governance. In the second pillar of reform and elections, that is where we are going to discuss on how the representation is going to be different from the current representation, and how Parliament will be substantially reformed, not only in reducing numbers, but in making it more inclusive than it has been so far. I cannot preempt now on what this discussion is going to be, because I want to be Somali-owned and Somali-led, and the discussion on the constitutional reform aspects will be held in Garowe, Puntland, at the beginning of November. But these are the principles we want to advocate and to see implemented as we address the second pillar of the roadmap.
My last question.
Yes.
In the last 20 years, there have been a lot of people who have committed crime against humanity. Will there ever be justice served for those guys?
I believe this will be the first task of the next government. But we should all know that any crimes against humanity or crimes of war cannot go unpunished. Impunity is something that needs to be one of the principal undertakings of any credible government. I know already in this government, which has acceded to many international conventions, including those on human rights, and a report that has just been prepared and submitted to the Human Rights Council, the Somali government that would follow would certainly have to pursue these cases. And on this matter, it's not only the Somali government. There are international institutions. The International Criminal Court, human rights bodies have been following closely on what has been happening in Somalia, even at the darkest hour of the Somalia crisis. We have seen in history that even when the perpetrators of such crimes have died, they are tried posthumously. And I really hope that there will not only be redressed for those who have been aggressed, but justice must be seen to be done. And this must remain on the agenda. Time is always on the side of justice. And I think that time will come. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Augustine Mahiga. One